Tonight we bring you urgent breaking news from the volatile southern front of Ukraine, a region that has become the epicenter of a rapidly escalating conflict. Chaos has erupted on the Zaporizhia front, with the sounds of artillery and gunfire echoing through the darkness. The situation on the ground is changing by the minute, as both sides scramble to respond to the unexpected developments. What began as a seemingly small and targeted Ukrainian military action has now spiraled out of control, transforming into a major crisis for Russian command. Ukrainian forces, moving swiftly and with precision, managed to catch Russian units off guard, throwing their defensive lines into chaos. Russian commanders, faced with the sudden and unexpected assault, lost their ability to see the battlefield clearly and direct their troops effectively. This breakdown in communication led to widespread panic and disarray among Russian ranks, as officers struggled to make sense of the rapidly evolving situation. As the fighting intensified, Russian military bloggers quickly claimed that a massive Ukrainian counteroffensive was underway, spreading fear and confusion online. However, Ukrainian sources insisted that this was a precise, limited operation, carefully planned to exploit Russian weaknesses. The stark gap between these competing narratives exposed a core vulnerability in Russia's military structure. Commanders operating in the dark, unable to distinguish a probing raid from a full-scale offensive. This confusion paralyzed decision-making at critical moments. This unfolding drama is a case study in the realities of modern warfare, where control over information in the digital battlefield is now as vital as control over physical territory. The ability to shape perceptions and disrupt enemy communications can tip the balance of power. For Russian forces, the loss of reliable communication meant losing their eyes and ears on the battlefield. What could have been a manageable challenge quickly escalated into a full-blown command catastrophe, as units became isolated and unable to coordinate. Ukrainian forces, recognizing this critical weakness, exploited it with remarkable efficiency. Special operations teams moved under the cover of darkness, striking at vulnerable points and capturing key Russian positions before the enemy could regroup. The result, a limited but highly effective operation that shattered Russian confidence, exposed deep flaws in their command structure, and left their army isolated, vulnerable, and reeling from the shock of a well-executed Ukrainian assault. In the dim, uncertain light before dawn, small, highly trained Ukrainian infantry units began their silent approach into the so-called gray zone near the village of Verbov. This area, a no-man's land between the two armies, was shrouded in mist and tension, making every step forward a calculated risk. The soldiers moved with discipline and purpose, their faces set with determination as they navigated the maze of trenches and shell craters that marked the front line. Their mission was clear and precise: to clear out Russian observation posts, disrupt vital supply lines, and test the enemy's reaction to sudden, unexpected pressure. Unlike traditional offensives, their goal was not to seize and hold territory, but to create confusion, gather intelligence, and weaken the enemy's grip on the area. Every action was calculated to maximize impact while minimizing risk. The speed, stealth, and coordination of the Ukrainian assault took the Russian defenders completely by surprise. Within moments, the quiet of the early morning was shattered by the sounds of gunfire and explosions as Ukrainian teams struck with precision. Russian soldiers, who had grown accustomed to the slow, grinding pace of static trench warfare, suddenly found themselves in the midst of chaos. The close-quarters nature of the attack left them little time to organize or respond effectively. Lacking clear orders and cut off from their commanders, many Russian units were left isolated, forced to make split-second decisions under extreme pressure. The confusion was palpable, with some soldiers attempting to regroup while others simply tried to escape the onslaught. The Ukrainian operation was a textbook example of hit-and-run tactics: strike hard, achieve specific objectives, and then withdraw before the enemy could mount a coordinated counterattack. This approach kept Russian forces off balance and unable to predict where the next blow would fall. Ukrainian troops specifically targeted Russian communication relays and ammunition depots, knowing that disrupting these assets would sow even greater confusion and slow any organized response. Explosions rocked the Russian rear lines, further amplifying the sense of disorder. By the time Russian commanders began to grasp the scale and intent of the Ukrainian operation, it was already too late. The Ukrainian units had melted back into the landscape, leaving behind empty trenches and a shaken enemy. The psychological impact of the assault was immense. Russian troops, already weary from months of attritional fighting, now felt overwhelmed, unsupported, and deeply vulnerable. Many showed visible signs of stress and panic in the aftermath. This initial panic and confusion quickly spread up the chain of command, setting off a ripple effect that would challenge Russian leadership and disrupt their ability to coordinate an effective response. The rapid, precise Ukrainian operation had not only achieved its immediate objectives, but also exposed deep weaknesses in the Russian defensive system. The real turning point wasn't a firefight, it was a digital blackout. Russian forces had come to rely on Starlink satellite internet for battlefield communications. As the Ukrainian operation began, Starlink terminals across Zaporizhia went dead, plunging Russian units into digital silence. Analysts suspect a Ukrainian electronic warfare or cyber attack, possibly with Western help. Russian commanders, used to real-time maps and instant communication, were suddenly blind. Forced to use unreliable radios, their communications broke down completely. Orders couldn't reach the front, and support requests went unanswered. Units became isolated, unable to coordinate or even avoid friendly fire. The loss of Starlink didn't just cut internet, it destroyed Russia's ability to command. A limited Ukrainian raid became a full-scale crisis for the Russian army. The communications collapse crippled Russia's most important assets, drones and artillery. FPV drones, the eyes of the artillery, went dark without Starlink's data link. Russian forces lost the ability to spot Ukrainian movements or direct their own fire. Drone operators were powerless, their equipment useless. Russian artillery, now blind, fell silent. Crews had no targets and risked friendly fire. Ukrainian troops moved freely, no longer threatened by instant drone-guided strikes. The roles reversed. Russian soldiers now felt exposed and helpless. The silence of their own guns signaled isolation and vulnerability. Ukrainian forces exploited this, operating with a freedom they hadn't seen in months. The battlefield dynamic flipped overnight. With Russian communications in chaos, Ukraine pressed its advantage. The focus shifted to hunting high-value targets, Russian troops trying to regroup or flee. Ukrainian drone teams, with intact comms, targeted clusters of Russian soldiers and command posts. Long-range drones and missiles struck ammo depots and headquarters with little resistance. Each strike deepened the chaos, making Russian command recovery impossible. Russian units, lacking orders, made contradictory moves. Some retreated into ambushes, others tried and failed to form defenses. No artillery support meant no way to suppress Ukrainian advances. Ukrainian psychological operations urged Russian soldiers to surrender, amplifying panic. In hours, Ukraine inflicted disproportionate damage, destroying equipment, eliminating leaders, and shattering morale. This was a victory of precision and timing, not brute force. As the front unraveled and chaos spread across the battlefield, Russian military bloggers and pro-war correspondents rushed to fill the growing information void. With official channels silent or slow to respond, these unofficial voices became the primary source of updates for millions of anxious Russians. Their tone was urgent, even panicked as they described the situation in increasingly dire terms. They reported what sounded like a catastrophic Ukrainian breakthrough. Entire Russian regiments wiped out, defensive lines collapsing, and Ukrainian tanks pushing deep into Russian-held territory. The imagery they painted was one of disaster and defeat, with Russian forces in full retreat and chaos reigning on the front lines. These alarmist reports spread like wildfire across social media platforms, especially on Telegram and VKontakte. Within hours, millions of Russians were reading and sharing these dramatic updates, fueling a sense of hysteria and panic not just among civilians, but within the military itself. The military command, already struggling with a lack of reliable information due to the communications blackout, found itself reacting to these rumors. Officers scrambled to move reserves, reposition units, and call for air support, often against phantom threats that existed only in the fevered reports of bloggers. Critical resources were diverted to the wrong places, and confusion deepened as commanders acted on conflicting, unverified information. The fog of war thickened, with each new rumor prompting a fresh wave of frantic and often unnecessary military maneuvers. The feedback loop was unmistakable. Operational failures created an information vacuum, which bloggers and correspondents filled with disaster narratives. These narratives, in turn, shaped the military's response, creating a cycle of panic and overreaction. The military found itself responding to fiction rather than reality, making hasty decisions based on rumors and social media posts. This only worsened the crisis, as units became more disorganized, and the true situation on the ground grew even harder to discern. In the end, Russia's war machine was being steered not by clear-headed analysis or reliable intelligence, but by its own propaganda and the echo chamber of social media. The line between fact and fiction blurred, with disastrous consequences for both the military and the nation. The lack of centralized information control, combined with the overwhelming influence of alarmist media, made a bad situation far worse, leaving Russian commanders and soldiers alike lost in a storm of confusion and misinformation. While Russian media panicked, Ukraine stayed calm and disciplined. After hours of chaos, Ukraine's Ministry of Defense issued a clear statement: limited, successful clearing operations, no major offensive. They backed this with geolocated video evidence, exposing Russian bloggers' exaggerations. Ukraine's fact-based account seized control of the narrative and embarrassed Moscow. Russian bloggers and state media were forced to walk back their claims, damaging their credibility. Soldiers and civilians questioned why their own sources were so wrong. The incident eroded trust between Russian troops, commanders, and media. Ukraine's clarification revealed the depth of Russia's command failure to the world. A small operation became a strategic embarrassment for Russia. This crisis exposed deep flaws in Russia's command system. Over-reliance on Starlink, with no backup, left them vulnerable to a single point of failure. When Starlink went down, there was no plan B. Command paralysis followed. Russia's rigid top-down structure discouraged initiative. When cut off, frontline units froze. The pro-war media ecosystem made things worse. Unverified reports shaped military decisions. Commanders feared bad PR more than tactical mistakes, amplifying every setback. Russia lacked situational awareness and intelligence fusion, no alternative ways to build a battlefield picture. They couldn't distinguish a raid from an offensive, a basic military task. This fundamental failure left Russian command always one step behind reality. Zaporizhia offers Ukraine a blueprint for future operations. Create command chaos, not just destroy battalions. Disrupting Russian communications should be a primary objective. Blinding the enemy opens windows for rapid gains. Electronic warfare and cyber attacks must be central to ground operations. Ukraine can exploit Russian psychological weaknesses. Small, unpredictable strikes can force Russia to waste reserves and panic. Psychological operations and propaganda can amplify fear, encouraging surrender. Ukraine's flexible, decentralized command is a key advantage. Junior leaders must be empowered to adapt and act. The battle was a microcosm of the wider war-rigid doctrine versus adaptability. By refining these tactics, Ukraine can turn Russia's chaotic command into its own greatest weapon.